All right. So let's talk about now second-line chemotherapy. Leslie told us that bevacizumab has some indications. We have 3 single agents in resistant disease: PLD, topotecan, weekly paclitaxel. We have 3 platinum doublets in sensitive disease: carbogem, carbo-PLD, and carbopaclitaxel. So we now are in an era of maintenance therapy. Maintenance therapy, frontline bevacizumab, we've talked about it. Now maintenance PARP inhibitors in patients that respond to platinum. So Katie, why would a patient that responds to platinum also be helped by a maintenance PARP inhibitor?
Or maintenance anything.
Or maintenance anything.
Maintenance anything. So as you know, the standard of care used to be 6 or 8 cycles, and if you got them into a remission, for lack of a better word, you would stop. With 213 and the overall survival advantage and the results of Ariel 3 Nova and Solo 2, we have multiple approvals in this maintenance space. And in a selected population, those are people that went on a clinical trial, but now you can see in patients who were selected, at least in the PARP inhibitor case, by response. So this is the people that responded to chemo, enough to go on a maintenance. If you give them a maintenance PARP or not, the group that got placebo, their median progression-free survival is 5.5 months. Mm-hmm. So that's platinum resistance. Mm-hmm. So that's what you're setting half your patients up for. Mm-hmm. And so at minimum, use of a PARP inhibitor prolongs that. And so
how much?
Depending on the biomarker group, it could be 5.5 to 21 months in a BRCA patient, 5 to 13 months in an HRD patient, 5 to 8 months in a HRD negative patient. But you're turning a large proportion of those. First of all, you're prolonging the time to next chemotherapy, which is important. Second of all, you are extending the time away from this dichotomous platinum-resistant category, which doesn't really exist, so that you're reconsidering platinum, which is a really good drug, and when we call people platinum-resistant, we just stop using it. So then patients get it again, and they probably respond and do well. So it has a myriad of benefits, but it also, these studies just show us that if you do nothing, which patients, again, I've said this the 3rd time, shared decision-making. Some patients are done, and they need a break, and that's fine. But that shouldn't be I don't think that should be your standard of care, because you're setting people up to be resistant.
So what I'm going to say, so PARP inhibitors inhibit single-stranded DNA repair, and unrepaired single-stranded breaks create double-stranded breaks, and BRCA is a double-stranded break enzyme, and platinum also causes DNA damage. So if platinum works, it's kind of a test. So if platinum works, then a PARP inhibitor should work. So there's a shared biology mechanism of action. What percent, to your point, you say, standard of care, 1,500 patients, and 3 PARP inhibitors, 3 FDA approvals of PARP inhibitors, olaparib, niraparib, and rucaparib. What percent of patients do you think are not treated with a maintenance therapy after platinum response? In other words, she was pretty dogmatic and definitive that patients with platinum-sensitive response, second line, should get something, Bev or PARP. What percentage of patients are treated with observation? How common is that?
I think it's very common.
How's that possible if Dr. Katie Moore says that they shouldn't do it?
I don't know what the barriers are. I don't know what the barriers are. Knowledge, cost.
What do you think? Well,
it's actually very true. The majority of patients nationwide do not get maintenance therapy.
Even though she says they should.
But Katie knows more than most other people, and I think that the message just hasn't gone out there into the community, particularly as we talked about before.
How do we get the message out, Tom? How do we get the message out that there is a real therapeutic opportunity in treating patients who respond to second-line platinum, that you can get a PARP inhibitor and you can sometimes quadruple the PFS?
Yeah, I think unfortunately, if you look at the patterns of practice in the United States, which I'm most familiar with, you see there's a number of physicians who treat less than a handful of cases of ovarian cancer a year.
So you can blame it on the medical oncologist.
I'm not blaming it on any one.
Any low volume provider.
I'm talking volume, I'm not talking specialty, because
thank
there's
you.
some very, very good medical oncologists in our world.
Right.
And what I am saying though is if you're of the low volume practice, chances are that this data is not front of mind. And it is complicated. There have been all these approvals, but if you think about the clinician, there's a lot to go through. There's not one drug, one study. It's been 3 drugs, lots of studies, 4 different studies that impacted this approval process. And I think that that's something that makes it difficult. So in answer to your question, I think education is a very important part of this. And if you're not sure what to do with that patient, get a second opinion.
Thank you for that. Is there a survival advantage in using maintenance PARP? You mentioned that with 213 that there's probably a 5-month improvement in overall survival. Is there a survival advantage, Tom, with the PARP maintenance?
I don't know if we know that. I think that clearly the PFS data is fantastic, and we need longer term.
The only data that we would have is study 19.
19.
And
Right.
study 19, interestingly, is a small study, but did have also a 5-month improvement in overall survival. Wasn't the primary endpoint, but I think we hope for a survival advantage,
And I
right?
think we will see it.
Yeah,
But
I do.
regardless of that, what we're seeing consistently in our PARP trials is that you do have a subset of patients who have very long-term durable responses, and that's not irrelevant.
And it's
that's
tolerated,
important, and it's
right.
well tolerated. So I always say we need to have something that permits chronic therapy.
We have
And that-
6-7-year data now on olaparib.
Right,
as
that's what I'm
maintenance.
saying.
Right.
And there's about
Right.
10-11% of patients still
Right.
without disease.
The
So-
other thing I was just another one last point, I'm sorry, was that I found fascinating and very consistent that surprised me was, when you have a BRCA patient, a germline BRCA patient, our belief is that that's someone who's going to be really responsive to platinum and they're going to have this really good prognosis. And so you would think that would translate in the placebo arms to this longer PFS, as compared to the biomarker negative group. Did it? I mean, I was
It didn't,
shocked that
because-
they did exactly the same.
Well,
Right,
because
exactly.
BRCA is only predictive or prognostic when you treat the patient. So it doesn't change the biology. What it changes is the sensitivity to chemotherapy.
But you'd think they'd be that much more sensitive to the chemo you gave them and they'd go a little bit longer.
I think the fact that they're platinum sensitive speaks to that as well. So there's some
you're
measure
already
of HRD
selected,
that
yeah.
we're not testing for yet that exists in a platinum sensitive.
So I'm
But I
going
think
to
what Katie says, it's true, right, for first-line treatment.
Yeah.
But when it comes to recurrent disease,
That's
that's
right. That's
It
also
doesn't
true.
hold anymore.
Right.
It
Like,
doesn't
they have
hold
these
anymore, that's
much
true.
longer PFS frontline, but
Yeah.
and then you lose it.